I hope you've had a chance to review the videos I mentioned in our last session. I recently came across a series on the Tube Network and YouTube called Reclaiming the Throne, and honestly, it's a must-see. Reclaiming the Throne is a 3-part documentary series that traces the identity of the African diaspora, especially those scattered through the transatlantic slave trade, back to the ancient children of Israel. It blends biblical prophecy, historical records, and scientific research to argue that this identity has been hidden in plain sight for centuries. La Petite Côte, the Little Coast, is a coastal region in Senegal. In the 1400s to 1500s, Portuguese lançados settled along the West African coast. These were independent Portuguese traders who married into local families, creating enduring Luso-African lineages. Among them were New Christians, conversos, Jews forcibly converted in Portugal in 1497, followed by a second wave of migrants between 1600 and 1620, who fled to West Africa to escape persecution and were able to live openly as Jews under African protection. They were joined by degredados, criminals sentenced to exile, who also integrated into local societies. Across regions such as Senegambia, Cape Verde, and Upper Guinea, these groups together shaped a distinctive Luso-African Jewish identity unique to the group. The cast-out Portuguese, who became Afro-Atlantic power brokers. The lançados were Portuguese, and sometimes Spanish, Greek, or Indian exiles, fugitives, and especially New Christians, Jews escaping the Portuguese Inquisition, who settled along the West African coast from the late 1400s onward. They became deeply integrated into African societies and played a decisive role in early Atlantic trade networks. They formed Luso-African communities, whose mixed heritage children became crucial cultural and commercial intermediaries, ran clandestine networks in weapons, ivory, gold, hides, wax, and enslaved people. This image is connected to the Underground Railroad. Enslaved Africans and free black communities often blended. Arabic-influenced Sahelian writing traditions, because many West Africans were literate in Ajami scripts. Hebrew-like forms, because some African communities had long-standing Judaic traditions. Aramaic-derived shapes, through Ethiopian, Sudanese, and Sahelian contact. English cursive, learned in secret or through abolitionist networks. This produced writing that looks Western at first glance, but the strokes don't behave like English. This is a U.S. document the AI confirmed. AI confirms the line you're referring to. It comes from a 1969 memorandum written by Henry Kissinger during the Nigeria-Biafra War. In that memo, he described the situation of the Igbo people, then fighting as Biafra, this way. A people convinced that defeat means extinction. Their Igbos are the wandering Jews of West Africa. These an anthropological conclusion. They reflect how U.S. officials perceived the Igbo situation during the war. Here is the smoking gun. Have you ever heard of Yahya ibn Yaish, or Yahya Negro, from the 11th century? He was an influential Portuguese Jewish leader in the 11th century, honored by King Afonso I, and known by the cognomen Negro, because he was granted estates formerly owned by Moors. A prominent Jewish leader in Lisbon, highly respected among both Jews and the Portuguese monarchy. King Afonso I rewarded him for his service after the conquest of Santarém. The king granted him 2 estates that had belonged to Moors, and because of this, he adopted the cognomen Negro. A cognomen is a person's surname, family name, or a descriptive nickname. Originating from ancient Rome, it was the third name indicating a specific family branch, often derived from personal characteristics. At that time, this was not a racial designation. It referred to the Moorish, i.e., black or Moorish, estates he received. He became the founder of the Negro Ibn Yahya line, a major Sephardi family. The term Negro in medieval Iberia had multiple meanings, none identical to the modern racial category. Could refer to Moorish lands or Moorish associations. Could refer to dark complexion, but not necessarily sub-Saharan African. In this case, the Jewish Encyclopedia is explicit. He took the name because the king gave him Moorish estates, not because of his ethnicity. Remember what I told you about the AI bias. François-Maximilien Misol. This text comes from the book A New Voyage to Italy by François-Maximilien Misol, Volume 1, Letter 7. This section describes the Jews of Venice. Most editions place this page, 252-253. See the third line down. The text is correcting the mistaken belief that all Jews were black. It specifies that this description applied only to the Jews of Portugal. It also notes that Portuguese Jews married only within their own group, which the author interprets as the reason for their distinct appearance. Yahya ibn Yaish became the ancestor of the Ibn Yahya Negro family, which produced rabbis, court physicians, royal administrators, scholars, community leaders across Portugal, Spain, Italy, and the Ottoman Empire. This family remained influential for centuries. He claims to be a direct descendant of King David. Before the 1500s, Africans were not called Negroes at all. Europeans didn't yet have a single racial term for all African peoples. Instead, they used regional, ethnic, religious, and geographic names. And these names tell you a lot about how Africa was understood before racial categories were invented. So, what changed in the 1500s? The populations most aggressively targeted by Iberian authorities at this time were the Hebrews, who fled persecution under the Inquisition, and then the Africans. In other words, the Inquisition didn't end, it relocated. Its mechanisms of surveillance, punishment, and categorization were exported into the emerging Atlantic world. These Hebrews who fled Iberia found themselves under new racial and commercial labels. Thus, the term Negro was adopted not because of Africans, but because of Hebrews. This is exactly the kind of shifting identity and displacement described in Deuteronomy 28. I hope by this point you've reviewed some of the references I shared earlier in this search for truth. I don't think most whites will ever accept this truth, so let us ask, why? A major